Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Clarion River Brewing here in Clarion, Pennsylvania. It's a very special moment here for Clarion Athletics. I am Sean Fagan, joined by head football coach Chris Weibel, and this is the first edition of our Chris Weibel Coaches Show. Before we go any further, I think we would be remiss if we didn't thank the people here at Clarion River Brewing for inviting us in here for this Coaches Show, which will air on a weekly basis on Wednesdays over the course of football season. They've been very generous in allowing us this space, as they have for the other Coaches Show over the course of the year, and they've been big fans of the program and friends of the program.
Absolutely. I thank them a bunch, and we moved time around today to accommodate practice, so they have been kind enough to let us come in at a different time tonight, so very thankful.
Yeah, it is a little bit earlier than when this show is going to air over the course of the rest of the season. We're shooting for 7 o'clock air times over the course of the rest of the year, but some different things came into play. One of the most important things is the weather. I don't know if any of you have noticed right now, but it's incredibly hot outside. And Coach, if we could take a quick sidebar before we talk about football, maybe give our fans a look on the inside of the athletics program. When a situation like this arises where there's extreme heat, the athletic trainers, especially in light of some recent events across college football, really have a responsibility to make these kind of changes. So what was the process like for moving this practice and then likewise this program this evening?
Well, it's not as easy as just moving practice. You're looking at moving meetings, film sessions, and everything else that goes with it, lifting. But what we use is called best practice, and it deals with what's called a wet bulb temperature. It's about direct heat and body heat, and if your body heat gets too high, then some significant damage can happen to your body, if not death. So we got to be careful. So we move to later in the day where it starts cooling down, and hopefully not in direct sunlight, so we can get a full practice instead of just a half pad or no pad practice.
Yeah, obviously one of the biggest priorities for the team, obviously, you want to win, but at the same time you want to keep people safe, especially as we've seen across college football, especially in the past year, situations where there have been injuries and even tragedy because of that. So
Absolutely.
We want to keep the student-athlete's best interest in mind in that. But let's talk about football. You're coming off of a season opener against Shippensburg. Before we talk about the game, you opened the season in Pittsburgh at Highmark Stadium. It was supposed to be the tail-end celebration of the 150th anniversary of the university, and it ended up being quite an experience for the guys. They get off that bus, they've got the Pittsburgh skyline to their back, and they're staring at it from across the sideline. Pretty special experience for them, huh?
It was, and even for me, myself, stepping off there and the view from Highmark, just seeing the city skyline, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful day, and and you can look one way and you can pretty much see Heinz Field, and you can't see too much PNC because it's behind the city from that point. But you're in the big city, Pittsburgh, and you're playing a game. It's not the norm, so there's a lot of excitement involved. So it was neat. It was a neat experience.
And one of the things that it allowed the university to do was it really engaged with a lot of the Allegheny County alumni, brought a lot of people back. I know there were some people back that we don't normally see
Absolutely.
at games up here in Clarion, and it allowed them to come back and experience the program. And I just think that makes it a very special moment when you have people that haven't been back for a while, that don't know much about Clarion football. Maybe they haven't been to a game in 10, 15, 20 years. How important is it to re-engage with all of these people that have maybe been away from the program for so long?
It's extremely important. Your program runs on, to me, alumni support. When we took it down there at Highmark, and I've seen teammates of mine I haven't seen since I've played with them. So that was a pretty neat experience. Again, taking the game to them, I think, helped out a lot and did, kind of squeeze their heartstrings a little bit. Hopefully now we'll get them back up here for home games just because of that.
Well, let's take a look at the game. Didn't get the result you wanted, a 35-13 loss to the Red Raiders. To me, I couldn't shake the feeling that it felt so similar to last year's game, especially through the first half. Very low scoring, very defensive-oriented early on.
It was, and we knew it was going to be defensive-oriented. We're still building the offense here, and we knew They lost some key players on offense, and had young guys in key positions on their offense. So we kind of knew the defenses were going to battle it out to begin with, and they did the first half. It was a battle of the defenses in a low-scoring game, and we knew that was the way it was going to be, and some big plays were going to be the difference.
One of the things that stood out to me in the first half was the way your defense played against their offense. They were playing a redshirt freshman quarterback the majority of the game. You forced 5 3-and-outs in the first half of that game, and that's really what kept it close. They scored just the one touchdown midway through the first quarter. But you respond with a big momentum-shifting 3-and-out the next time your defense is out there, and that sets up your first touchdown of the game.
Yeah, again, it's, to be successful, I think you have to have a good defense, but you also have to keep them off the field. So you have to be able to control it with your offense. And we didn't control it as much as I would like to the first half or the entire game to keep the defense fresh. We were missing a couple key guys, on the D-line, one for a whole game, one for a half for different reasons. So the rotation wasn't there that we needed, and we knew that they were going to get tired pretty fast, especially in the heat last Saturday. So, they lasted as long as they could, I guess. And you're going to get worn down if you don't have that rotation.
So you're looking at that first quarter. Shippensburg scores, as I said, midway through. Your defense gets one of those big 3-and-outs, and the punt puts you on your own 47-yard line. Great field position, usually set up for a great, a short drive, and it was as short a drive as it could have been. It was a one-play, 53-yard drive. Mm-hmm. Malik McGriff shot off like a lightning bolt down the left-hand side and scored that touchdown. And all of a sudden, you feel that game in the first half, just when you thought maybe Shippensburg had taken some control, you seized that momentum back.
Yeah, and that's what football is. One play can make a difference, in a game, and you have to have a short-term memory. If something doesn't go your way, you can't dwell on it. You got to go out there and you got to play the next play because it could change the next play. And that's the kind of the mentality we've been talking about all camp this year was, short-term memory, one play away. And that's kind of how that played out.
You end the first half with a 40-yard field goal from Jimmy Metzger. That puts your team ahead 10-7. Shippensburg takes the lead by a score of 21-10 in the third quarter. Metzger kicks another field goal. That makes it 21-13, so it's still a one-score game heading into the fourth quarter, and that's really where things, I don't know if saying they got out of hand is too strong a term, but that's really where Shippensburg began to pull away. What were you seeing in that fourth quarter that was so different from the previous three quarters?
In the fourth quarter, they made some plays. They're a good team. They're going to make plays. They made a couple key catches in traffic. One-handed catch. We had some blown coverages. But good teams take advantage of mistakes. And that's what they did. And then on offense, we just couldn't get clicking. Second half, the adjustments we made at halftime didn't get totally executed the way we talked about them at half. So, we stalled on offense and, in defense again. To me, just kind of wore down a little bit, and again, good teams make good plays, and they made some good plays, and they won by, a couple scores. So,
one of the things that was noticeable to me is not to harp on the running game, but you see McGriff has 93 yards rushing at the end of the first half. He ends the game with only 94, and you could tell the defense really keyed in on him in the second half. Was it a scheme change? Was it just better performance? Was there something different, or was it just the natural way of things, how that turned out in the second half?
Well, you have to stop the run first, and I know that as well, and we'll do the same thing. But, we have young receivers. We haven't proven that we can throw the ball a lot during the game. So if I was them, what I would be saying is let's take away the run, and see what they do. They took away our run, and we struggled in the pass game. And that played in. They made a good decision with that, I think.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about the individual performances in that game after this short break. Keep tuned in here to the Chris Weibel Show. You're watching on Clarion Golden Eagle Vision. Welcome back to the Chris Weibel Show. I'm Sean Fagan. Oh, hang on. I got to turn my microphone back on. Jeez. Welcome back to the Chris Weibel Show. We're getting all the kinks worked out here in the first week. Sean Fagan joined by head football coach Chris Weibel. Coach, let's talk about some of the individual performances in that game. I know I've mentioned him twice already. I don't want to beat a dead horse. But Malik McGriff, got off to the great start, finished still with 137 all-purpose yards. And even when he wasn't rushing the ball effectively or for big yardage in the second half, it seemed like the adjustment was to get him out more wide, and he caught some more passes. And that added a new wrinkle against Shippensburg. Has he developed that part of his game from last year to this year?
He has, and we met after last spring, and, we talked about what he needed to do in the offseason. To me, it was to get stronger and, obviously bigger, faster, smarter, because he battled some injuries last year early, but he did. He worked hard in the offseason, came back, and, he was running hard. He's got great hands, and if we can't hand it to him, then we need to throw it to him. Because he's definitely can make things happen when he get the ball in his hands. So that's kind of what our idea was, and I think he had a good all-around game himself, till he got banged up there at the end.
Seems to me that it's so important for a player to walk a line of confidence and cockiness. And I remember, and you were there, we were taking some social media brand photos earlier this year, and he was joking around doing the Heisman pose,
right.
And so was Andrew Veneta as well, as I recall, or Robbie Corzone rather. But right. I said, hey, you're putting some pressure on yourself when you do something like that. And he said, I don't mind the pressure. And he strikes me as the kind of kid that doesn't mind the pressure of getting better.
He doesn't, and he's a kid that, every play, practice, game, he's flying around. He's giving the best effort he can, even when he's tired. I mean, that's what makes him a good player, because he never goes half speed. He never takes a play off. So he just keeps getting better and better every time he touches the ball.
You alluded to the young receivers in your passing game. You had 8 different guys catch passes. That in and of itself isn't necessarily remarkable. But as the game went on, it looked like you were shifting the formula as to what guys you had out there catching passes. Mm-hmm. Were you looking for that magic formula with the young receivers, trying to find something that would fit with so many freshmen and sophomores out there?
You do. You try to find, who's going to give what you want and what they've been taught. We had some mistakes early on, so we're going to give the next guy a try, and see what he can do. So it's kind of, again, trial and error type thing. We want to see who's going to go out there and be a gamer. And sometimes that's rotating a lot of guys through.
One of the guys that I don't think too many of our fans know much about, because he just came in this year, was Dana Jackson, and he had the long gain in the second half. I believe it was a 37-yard completion. Now, some of that was lost due to a penalty after the play, but the point remains, he was able to get behind the defense, take the top off, and get some of that extra yardage. What's his story? What makes him dangerous?
He's quick. He's quick. He's fast. And I told him he should have scored. But he's quick, he's fast, he's got good hands. He's a threat. And on that play specifically, we designed that for Shippensburg defense. We knew it was going to be open. It was a route to him. We just by the way they play defense. Hey, we're looking at him, we're throwing it to him. And it's exactly the way we drew it up, and it happened. And like I said, he's quick, he's fast, he's got good hands. What else do you want?
Well, another guy that we saw a lot of was Marcus McCoy. Made a big, I believe it was either third down catch there, and he just missed on that touchdown in the end zone on the sideline there. Nice ball, and he just a little bit out of bounds there on that one.
I think if there was a replay, we might have got a replay.
Well, I don't want to lay too much on you, but up in the press box from our vantage point, we thought that he might have been in. That was our call.
Well, the picture, I saw a picture, and he has the ball in his hands, and his left foot's in.
Yes.
And his right foot lands out, but it must not have been control yet or something, but
whatever the case may be, he's a guy that you were really high on, coming in last year. Absolutely. As a redshirt freshman. You've spoken, pretty candidly about how you felt like he didn't take control of that opportunity last year,
right.
But this year he has really seized this chance to be one of the guys, if not the guy, just because of the physical tools he has.
He is. He's big. He's strong. And he came in shape. He came in wanting it. And that's something we talked about. In his off season, and he came in and he's shown us that he wants it and he has worked. So I'm very impressed with what he's doing. He's doing a great job. Not only a good wide receiver, but if it wasn't for him, Malik McGriff wouldn't have had his long touchdown because Marcus made the key block, and that's important because not all receivers like to block. But him being big and physical, he doesn't mind it. So I'm looking forward to big things from Marcus. Seeing what he can do, and again, he goes up and gets the ball as well with his size. So we're going to keep feeding him the ball if we can.
This was your first time in the years that he's been here that Jeff Clemens entered week one as the guy. And you and I talked about this at the Fall Coaches Show last year. But now you've had a chance to see him in a full week of game prep, and you got to see him in game one. Seems to me like the struggles of the offense sort of infected everybody, for lack of a better phrase.
Right.
But what did you see out of Jeff as far as taking command of that huddle in that first game where he knew he was the guy?
Jeff did some good things, and he did some things not so good. And we talked about those. But the good thing is they're fixable. So he is a leader. He does understand what's going on. I think he put a little bit too much pressure on himself. Being from North Allegheny, Highmark Stadium, Pittsburgh, hometown, kind of pressure for him. And I think really that's what played the part, because he played, to me, he didn't play like himself, for a lot of that game. And I know how good he is, So I think the pressure played a lot of part of it, and you're playing a really good defense.
Sure.
So that plays a big part in it.
Well, that Shippensburg defense, I mean, as I recall, they basically returned everybody in their front seven.
Yep.
And that was a team that went 10-2 last year. Their only losses were to a playoff team. It was Westchester. And they were, in most categories, the best defense in the conference last year. So, maybe it's a stretch to say you might not see a defense as good as Shippensburg's the rest of the year, at least based on what they did last year. Obviously, everybody likes to think they've improved, but that was a very good defensive front.
It was, again, like you said, their whole front seven was returning, and they actually had one of their safety was out because he got injured, during camp. But they had some young guys in the secondary there that some of them have played before, playing time, and some of them were new. But again, they're a tough defense, and they did some really good things, and looking from last year to this year, last year we didn't score any points. This year we scored at least 13. So I feel like we've improved against a defense that has improved. That has been one of the top, and then last year, and probably going to be this year.
By downing 2 punts on the 1 yard line, did Ryan Barr set too high of a bar for himself in week one? That's going to be tough to do again.
That is going to be tough to do. He did a great job, and we should have been able to pin them down there and get the ball back. That's something that we definitely need to work on a little bit. But he did a good job, and he won the job in camp, and I'm looking forward to seeing if he continues, to do the same stuff throughout the season.
All right, Coach, we're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to look ahead to the Bald Eagles. They're coming up this Saturday on the road, your first true road test of the season. We'll be right back with the Chris Weibel Show on Clarion Golden Eagle Vision. Welcome back to the Chris Weibel Show. Sean Fagan joined by Clarion head football coach Chris Weibel. Let's take a look to the week ahead. The Golden Eagles will take on their natural enemies in the wild, the Bald Eagle. Lock Haven, coming off a season where they won 2 games. They were 2-9, 2-6 in conference play, but beat a pretty good Bloomsburg team that you saw last year.
Right.
But they're going to be a little different than they were last year. They're going to be without Kyle Knight, or at least it would appear.
Yeah, they went to more of a running type offense, with Kyle, because he's a really good runner. And I think, from what I understand, if he wouldn't play quarterback, or if somebody else was good enough to play quarterback, he'd play running back. So that's what type of runner he is. So you base yourself around your offense around quarterback runs, which is hard to defend because you don't normally account for the quarterback run to football because you pick up an extra blocker. So that's something that, if he plays, we got to be ready for, and if he doesn't, we have to be ready for, because we're not sure. You can't change your whole offense just because your quarterback goes down. So we've got to plan for some of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things with a quarterback like him. We got the 2 deep for Lock Haven this week. He was not on it. But you're talking about a guy that rushed for roughly 800 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. I mean, you're not talking about a guy that's going to take off occasionally or when the play breaks down.
Right.
That's what he wants to do.
Right.
And so when that guy's not in there, they're going to look at redshirt senior Cameron Tobias. And Tobias is a guy that has some starts under his belt, and so he's no stranger to the quarterback position. In theory, I would guess different than Kyle Knight, but still a guy that has seen some serious playing time.
Yeah, I mean, he started in the PSAC. We got to be prepared for what he can do. He's not more he's more of a typical passer than he is Kyle as a runner. But again, you still got to be prepared for that stuff because that's what they do. We just now have to be prepared, I think, for a little more passing, coming this way this week, and kind of adjust during the game.
This might be a moot point then, but you last saw Lock Haven in 2016 in the season opener. I would love to say, well, what's different about them now than it is them? But I guess it's possible that it could even be different from last week to this week with the injury. But in general, the program, what have you seen different in that program since that time?
Again, a big part of it's their offense and what they changed and what they were doing with Kyle, under center. Their defense is stayed similar to what they have been. I do know that they've got a new defensive coordinator, but I think they still. He was with Coach Tanner years ago at Urbana, so they know each other. So it didn't change a lot. But they do some different things and they do some different coverages, and so we have to be ready for all that stuff. So they do some unique stuff. So it's kind of like if you're playing an offense that still runs the wing tee. You have 3 days to prepare for the wing tee when you don't face anybody else that runs it.
And that's not a lot of fun.
And that's not fun, So if you do things a little bit different than other teams, then you have to make teams prepare in 3 days for it, instead of, hey, if you're just running a college 4-3 and everybody in your conference does, it doesn't take much preparation. So they do some different things, which we got to make sure we're ready.
They started out their season last week with a 45-0 loss at Division I FCS Duquesne. That was a game that was 35-0 at halftime. When you're looking at something like that where there's such a scholarship disparity and then, not to be insulted, but then there becomes a talent disparity between the two teams. When you watch the film of that, do you look at more at general concepts? Do you focus more on, hey, how did Duquesne prepare to play against this style of offense, or maybe how did they prepare to play against this style of defense, more than you look at maybe individual player, individual effort?
You kind of look at it all. You look at everything you said about it, but you also do individual, because you want to see how some of their guys match up against some of Duquesne's guys. Sure. And a lot of them played really well. And that's something we have to make sure, again, we're ready for, because again, it's a different level, it's a different caliber athlete for the most part, and I think they sometimes stood toe to toe with them, and obviously they got outscored, but they had a lot of good play. It's different when you watch coaches' film rather than a game, just a regular game, or you hear the score. You really got to sit down and look at what really happened in the game. And they did a lot of good things, and they have some really tough players.
One of those tough players, part of their young defense, the linebacker Obadiah Assar, he had 11 tackles last week, a tackle for loss. He also had a forced fumble and a fumble recovery. We've talked about how you had a young defense last year. Well, they've got a young defense this year, but he's one of those guys that really stood out against the Dukes.
Yeah, I mean he's all over the place. He likes to hit, which they all do. They all like to hit, and and he made a lot of big plays, and he's someone we definitely have to account for to make sure we know where he's at all times because he was their leading tackler, against a pretty good football team. So again, we're going to make sure we know where he's at.
Offensively, their returning leading pass catcher from a year ago was Jalen Jackson. He's another young player. He's a sophomore tight end. Not your prototypical tight end as far as weight, but he's a tall guy. He's got some bulk to him. What makes him dangerous in the passing game?
Any tight end's dangerous to me because you can hide them. Last week, we lost the tight end a couple times, and caught big plays. You probably should have caught another one. So you can hide them a little bit. You can move them around. You can slip them up through the middle. You're not too sure if they're blocking at the second level or if they're going out for a pass. So you can get them in open space in the middle and or slip them out in a flat. And they're dangerous. If they're athletic, they can catch football. They can hurt you.
And finally, taking a look at offense and special teams, they've got Nasir Mini-Gratz. He's a guy that was an all-conference performer as a kick returner. He was their leading receiver a week ago, but those guys just add such a different element. I can't remember the statistic, but a couple years ago I heard somebody say that teams that return a kick or an interception for a touchdown win 70% of the time.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if I just completely made that number up or not, but it seems like those guys make such an impact.
They do, and that's something that's hard to get across to your team, though. Is special teams change ball games. Even extra point. Miss extra point, cost you games. It's happened to us. So we got to make sure, again, we account for him and make sure we don't give him, an easy lane to run through. He's a shifty guy. He's a smaller guy, but very, very sturdy, and strong. So we got to make sure we can enclose him and keep him, don't let him out in the open and run around. And, again, the special teams play a big part in every game, but that's, again, it's hard to get across to your team, how important those are. Until, circumstances happen, which you don't want to, but you learn from them.
Sure. All right, Coach. Well, that's going to do it for us here this week at Clarion River Brewing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Brian Smith at Clarion River Brewing and all of his staff for accommodating us and taking care of us here in the brewery. I'd like to thank Jared Sullenberger and Anthony Williams from the Clarion Sports Information staff. I'd like to thank all of our Clarion athletics friends of the program that are here enjoying today's show, and I'd like to thank all of you for watching it at home as well. We'll be back next week on Wednesday at 7 o'clock with the next edition of the Chris Weibel Show. The Golden Eagles kick off against Lock Haven this Saturday. Kickoff will be at noon. You can watch that live on the Clarion Golden Eagle Vision app as well as the PSAC Network. I'm Sean Fagan for head coach Chris Weibel saying thank you and have a good evening.